EU. That is something which has got its surfing wave, if I may put it like this, during the Estonian presidency of the Council of the EU in 2017, where Estonia proposed that as one of the priority topics for the youth field. And when the member states of the European Union discussed how we could actually take the digital development further in youth field, and agreed to put forward the concept of smart youth work in the format of council conclusions. So it's really a policy document. It was based a lot on the steps taken so far then by Estonia on a national level, but nevertheless, it is not an Estonian thing in that sense, that it's really an agreement between the policymakers in Europe, in all the member states, to say this is the innovative approach to the youth field as it is. By that time already, there have been several terms actually which were used in the practical youth work field, digital youth work, online youth work, cyber youth work, and that was also one of the reasons to look at what has been there in the different countries' practices and try to make sense a little bit what we're talking then on different levels. And one of the very important components of the smart youth work concept was to say that it is not only about the digital youth work practice, but also some other components or dimensions we consider essentially important in order to make a change. And that would be then the quality, the policy, and the research. So in a way, we could say that this tries to encompass them all and try to take an innovative development in there. There is an important process going on now in the frame of the Finnish presidency, still running for the last days until the end of this year. And the Finnish presidency has also, bless you, whoever was it, the Finnish presidency has also put forward their priority in youth field, digital youth work. So really to look at one of the dimensions of the smart youth work, the digital youth work practice. And we wanted to share with you the extract from the Council conclusions on digital youth work, which have just been adopted on 21st of November, so if I'm correct. So it's a very recent one, even not officially published in official journal yet, but you can already find the document both on the paper and on online as well, and in our resource pack. And basically this is just to clarify, to say that what we are heading to is not a thing on its own, but it is something which is essential part of youth work, how we actually make the most of the use of the digital media and technology in youth work, without seeing this as a thing on its own. It's not a method on its own, it can be a tool, content, and activity in whatever format. And this is what we would like to see more and more happening in order to reach out to more young people and engage them more via the digital technology tools as well. But it is underpinned clearly by the same ethics, values, and principles. Besides these two documents, there are two more resources we would like to refer to. Maybe you are familiar with them already. If not yet, you might find some good inspiration and reading from these as well. This is the, on the left, there is the expert group report who has been working since 2016 until 2018. Again, the representatives of different member states and looking at the risks and implications of the digital era on the youth work and young people. And this is a much more thorough material and maybe speaking even more to the practitioners than the Council conclusions document format necessarily would do, because it also looks at the competence development needs of youth workers and everything much more from the practical perspective as well. And on the right, one of the very recent publications as well, the European Guidelines for Digital Youth Work, which is one of the results of a project run by 6 or 7 countries, and as a result to put forward again some of the principles we might use in order to boost further the digital youth work. So in a way, when we will be using these terms during SomeCamp here, in our understanding, it would be that in the smart youth work, we are talking about the wider concept, also tackling the policy dimension, the strategic outlook, the research and quality components, and then the digital youth work, really looking at the practice, what we do in youth work practice as it is. Voila. We are here at this very moment now. We are online, like we say. I hope that my colleagues have posted the link exactly to the channels as well, what you can then promote. And we are about to kick off with the discussion. Ooh, the walls are moving, amazing. So I have... Oh no, actually, I'm the first on the stage. I have this privilege here now. So I will take the seat here in this lovely fireside setup. And I can't wait to have an exciting fireside chat with some people we have invited here today. As a first thing, I must deeply apologize because we have to apologize Mrs. Kristi Vinter-Nemvalts, the Deputy Secretary General from Estonian Ministry, as it has now come out that she's not finally able to make it to join us today. So hopefully, during your days here, still let's try to see how much and what we can know from the other colleagues from Estonian youth work scene in order to get to know then the things we might otherwise have heard from Kristi Vinter-Nemvalts. But this is how it is. We have here two other panelists we have invited to join us. We have people from 12 countries in this room, and we have hopefully many people watching us online. So this is a good moment to everybody to wave now and say, Mommy, I'm on TV, watch at me. And we're going to discuss a very exciting smart youth work approach. This is as it is, sitting in a nice forest area. And a good moment, you know how I would say in Estonian we have a saying that the nature does not tolerate the empty spot. And I couldn't think of a situation where it is more literally true than here with these white chairs on the stage. So that is the reason I would be very happy to welcome now the first of our speakers to the stage. This is Mirja Hämäläinen. Mirja. Mirja is a consultant in independent think tank called Demos Helsinki in Finland, and working a lot together with different partners, both from the public and private sector, with young people, with seniors, whoever is there in our society, in order to impact the societal transformation. And you have worked as a journalist, researcher, developer, and you are specifically in Demos Helsinki focused on a thematic area, democracy and capabilities. And we believe it has a lot to do with the issues we are about to discuss today. And you have a specifically very interesting experience by societal involvement of young people in a project called Safari. So hopefully we will hear more about that as well. So tervetuloa Mirja Hämäläinen from Demos Helsinki. Let's clap.
Thank you.
And the third seat is there for somebody who is a very interesting mix. He's an educationalist, trainer and youth worker from Italy. And he, as he says himself, he's hanging out at the crossroads of liberal arts and digital technologies. He's someone who is an inspiring practitioner on gaming, both with young people and youth workers, and also someone who has set up one of the international training programs, Digit Up, since 2015, and which is similarly to SomeCamp EU, where we are now, attracting the hundreds of applications every year. They are announcing it. So definitely somebody who has a say in the youth workers' competencies as well as the competence models as such. And I'm talking about no one else than Michele Di Paola from Italy.
Beware of the fire.
I hope everything will stay under control with the fire and all the rest as well. To kick off with our discussion today, the stage might feel a bit far away. Nevertheless, we are all in the same reality, we like to believe, both within this side of the screen and the other. And to start off, we have kindly asked our panelists to inspire us and make some opening statements on the topics of what is your dream vision of the youth work in a digital era, and what's your own mission in that? So maybe we could first hear these and then to kick off the discussion from there on. Cool. Miriam, go ahead, please.
I'll look at my notes. My dream and vision would be that every young person and every youth worker would get the support they need to live the best life they can in the digital world. This could mean like getting the best skills they need to navigate this new kind of realm, but also sometimes it's very concrete support with, let's say, bullying or stuff like that. And just to get every youth worker in Finland, Estonia, in Europe to use these skills and tools as effectively as possible. I see this kind of development also as really important for technology development as a whole. I would see youth work. I would love to see it has had a more clear vision on how to get different kind of groups involved in developing technology in general. Because as we know, a lot of skills needed for using technology and getting the best possible possibilities from it are stuff that people actually don't learn from formal schooling, but from hobbies and such, and different kind of encounters.
So in a way, already something we're referring to young people as creative users and developers rather than consumers in that sense as well. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Miriam. Michele, all ears.
Yep. I would say I share this kind of vision to empower youngsters, but not only youngsters, in being as much as they can protagonists also in the digital world. Let's say just this super big and wide expression now, and then we need to explain and go deeper inside it. So what I would like to see is that technology will not be felt, especially in the youth work field, as a problem, a risk only, or something to fear because maybe we don't understand it so much, because we have this idea that youngsters are so far beyond the point where we are, so we have to, for one time, maybe for the first time ever, run after them and not the other way around. I would say dream, it's a vision, but it's a big dream, is that we can start considering technology in all these forms as what they indeed are. So ideas, tools, attempt to improve our condition and our ways to stay together, to get as much connected as we can, which is, I think, a basic human behavior and a basic human needs, maybe boosted now and improved, or possibly improved by so many new features, tools, platforms, and whatever. We will see about it later on. So what I do to try to do my little part to achieve this dream is to, as you introduced, to give trainings to youth workers, to work with formal education sector, so do a lot of workshops and seminars in schools, either with students and with teachers. Try to work with parents, which are scared, totally scared about something they really do not get, of course, in general, and you should not generalize, but it's what I'm doing. And yeah, and trying also to wonder which are the best ways to do these training activities, workshops, whatever, because another problem in the problem is that this domain is completely unsettled, so it changes every few weeks or months, and there's something new to keep up with every now and then, and so it makes, from one side, very interesting, but on the other side, quite tough to cope with.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Miguel, as well. I would say from now on, the micro is open as well, so don't feel too far away from our chat at the fire in no case, and use the opportunity. Juha is somewhere there with a microphone in the room, so please just raise your hand and give a sign if you would like to join in with a comment or questions, because that's a good chance, we believe. But as a first thing, I would like to pick up something you mentioned right away, and maybe hinting us towards some of the concerns or obstacles we see on the way at this very moment. And something what you referred to is this kind of pattern of thinking, or almost a myth, not to see the digital development in youth field as a problem or a risk, but rather to have it as a much more positive outlook and potentials in that. And I must say that it really touches me also, because I've been moaning to some of my colleagues recently that we have just launched the national competition for young people to stand up with their youth initiative projects. And then we started receiving the proposals by young people. There were really several of them. Young people were stating that we want to do this project or activity because we want to get the young people out of the technology, and we really want them to put away their phones and talk to each other. And we really see the need to provide something else, which my own feeling would be that without denying the important dimension of mental stability and health, which is clearly there in this issue, I think that kind of way of thinking would most likely still be programmed into young people by adults, because I believe that for the young people, for many of them, there is no distinction between their online life and other real life, whatever that would then mean. So my idea would as well be to definitely support the idea that what we as youth workers can do to raise the knowledge without actually harming young people and making them feeling guilty because of using technology, which I think is happening a lot as well. So maybe your comments on these kind of myths or patterns of way of thinking would be welcome here as well.
Yeah, I think it's partly because we don't have enough experience, let alone research on what kind of connections and relationships there are, like in the digital world, that's still somehow seen as different sphere from the real world or something like that. And I think that's not only in youth work, but with young people, but with everyone. We're still like researching and trying to figure out what these things mean. If it's like, if you have a relationship online, or if you chat with your friends constantly, is that something that's considered like a meaningful relationship, or something that's meaningful for your life in general? And I agree that it's something that the older generation tend to see as a threat, and this also, of course, affects the...
But then going along with your idea that we should research more about it, we should raise our own awareness, probably also that's part of becoming the critical reflectors of that, and that is something what we should also maybe invite young people and then support young people to become more the critical reflection able users rather than making it very black and white, try to avoid and do more things without technology, which probably is not actually one of the things we would see happening in future anyway. Michele?
Well, I want to get back to something that you just said when you say we try to make youngsters to feel guilty because they use technology. They don't. They don't feel guilty at all. They just do it, and they look at us and they say, I don't know, okay, boomer or something like that, just because it's something which is there and it's silly not to use it. There is, as you said, absolutely no division in their life experience between what's happening in the street and what's happening in the online part. And also a simple game that we do when we work with kids in middle school, meaning 12, 13 years old in Italy, is tell me the opposite of real. The opposite of real is unreal. The online world is pretty much real. If you have a fight with a friend in a WhatsApp chat group and you meet it in the road, it's not that nothing has happened. You don't want to meet them in the room, in the road, because this is a part of your life which goes on from one to the other domain, let's say. And so it's completely pointless to keep this kind of division in our mind, and it should be the first step to enter smart youth work done in the proper way. Try to overcome this division and consider digital as one of the aspects of everyday life, not only youngsters' life, everybody's life. Because sometimes the same parents maybe that are super concerned because my child is spending so many hours chatting on his phone are the ones which then sit at table for dinner with a phone close to the dish. And so again, what's the point? Of course there are risks. It's not that we are living in a super fancy, perfect world. Never, even before digital. Of course there are risks, and of course it's our task to help youngsters and adults, as everybody, to understand which are the risks and how to try to diminish the percentage of risk that we are taking, knowing that since we are using mostly private platforms, again, one paragon which normally we do in middle school is we are playing football in someone else's garden and we don't even own the ball. So yeah, this is the main risk probably. Huh? So there are risks, we should know them, we should help youngsters and people in general to understand them, but there are also huge, incredible opportunities to do something better and also to do something new, which never happened before because it was simply not possible. One little aspect of this is, for instance, youngsters, kids, always created their own toys since a certain moment. It was normal for the generation of my parents to play with toys that they would create. Then, after the war, the economical boom, toys industry got so great and kids should buy toys, plastic toys and so on. And then video games came, and of course we will talk about video games, and there is a workshop later on about video games, okay? So everybody should go into video games. Now we have easy tools and ways to help youngsters to create their own video games, for instance. So getting back to where we should be, that kids produce and play their own games. But so instead of staying out of the door because there's the devil inside, we should really enter that door and have a look around, and maybe we should find something interesting there to be used and to be proposed as tools in our everyday youth work.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Michele, for that thought. Any comments, ideas from the group?
We are scaring them.
There is someone. Please shortly introduce yourself. We have several, even better. Please shortly introduce yourself and then put forward the question.
Hi everybody, I'm Massimo from Italy. And I want to ask you, I've been 2 days ago, the last week in a conference, not exactly a conference, but a work group where everybody said, okay, virtual reality is not something that translates the reality, but it is the reality. But, and you say the same, Michele, but my question is that, what about the emotion and the feelings of the people? Because in my understanding, the virtual reality is something more intellectual or logic, something logic, but not the emotion. What about the emotion and the feelings? How to work with this? Because in my experience, a lot of young people now are not confident with the feeling and the emotions. But this is my opinion, my experience.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks a lot, Massimo. Any comments on that?
Yes, sure. Many youngsters are not so much familiar with handling emotions. Yes, it is automatically connected to the use of online platforms and such. I don't know, not me, but we don't know yet in terms of research and results. What can I say from my experience is that it's not emotions which are missing in the digital world, it's bodies. So I would be concerned more about how to get bodies connected somehow to the digital tools and platforms that we use, because emotions, indeed, they are there. If you play some video games, you find yourself crying for what's happening there. If you go chatting during the night with some lover far away from you, you feel the emotion of this connection, even though there is a screen in between. I guess you can achieve emotion also in the digital domain. Bodies, still quite difficult, not meaning that we have to connect our bodies to a computer, this is some sick dystopia or whatever, but meaning that not having a body there means probably that some aspects of relationships could stay maybe a little in the shade. So for instance, I feel easier to offend someone because, come on, it's not even here. I feel easier to comment maybe in a rough way about your body, again, because your body is not here. So personally, I'm much more concerned about this aspect than this complaint about emotion and depersonalizing the relationships. But that's just me.
Yeah, maybe briefly comment on that. I definitely agree, and I see like the big institutions we have, like democracy is also built on physical encounter to some extent, and I think that's a very good point. And I do agree that the emotions are real, but it's a different kind of connection in a way. It's the emotions are real, but maybe the connection is not in the same way as it is in the physical world, but we don't know yet.
But maybe also just to bring in another example on the emotional attachment and connections. In Estonia, we have decided to promote the youth work profession via the VR solutions as one of the means as well. What we do is that we have set up the system, and with the workshops we go around and we allow young people to experience the VR reality of youth workers' day work. And that example, together with the fact that this year the 10 open youth centers in Tallinn have joined their forces in order to create the first VR solutions of all the local youth centers in Tallinn. And that is basically for the same reason, to allow young people to get the first feeling, the first emotion about either then the youth workers profession or an open youth center. And the logic behind would be that even a very simple step, we would consider a very simple step, going to the local youth center might be a challenge for many young people, going there physically. And we believe that here the VR solution, for example, or the first feeling they can get through that kind of contact could give them the more courage to go and actually make a step in a physical contact. So maybe that is just to bring in another example how you could, with a very simple ways of even in the youth field promoting either the profession itself or then the youth work opportunities, work actually with emotions and feelings without actually being in a physical contact with young people yet. We had second question as well, Alicia.
Hi, my name is Alicia and I'm came here from Scotland today. The question that I have is with regards to something that you mentioned during early on about the sort of power dynamic between adults and young people and how often we can hear young people sort of adopting those negative narratives, fearful narratives. So as a digital youth worker and a researcher, I had that problem many times when I'm sort of trying to empower young people to be active agents of social change online. But at the same time, I'm also sort of realizing that they are within this big power dynamic of the digital world. You know, their data is collected. There is the privacy paradox where young people are worried about their privacy, but there's nothing they can do about it, and they don't do much about it. And I'm sure most of us do it as well. So how do you as a digital youth workers, how do you manage that problem? How do you respond to that in your work? Is there a solution? Probably not, but
maybe you can take this one.
Well, there is not yet a solution, but I would say it's about time that we start addressing the platforms and the creators and the developers. Maybe not me as a single youth worker in a very far away little youth center in the middle of nowhere, but as countries, or even better, as European Union, it's about time to knock to some doors, either in terms of more strict data protection, even though GDPR already achieved something, and data exploitation, which is still happening in most of the social media platforms, which are still subjected to United States regulations, so kind of difficult to make them accountable from the European system, which is a topic itself, which should be completely taken into someone's hands and solved. And also, something we should really start to do, and it's slowly happening, but too much slowly in my opinion, it's, for instance, going to the creators, the developers, and maybe start to work with them to create something new that we plan and design together. What about video games in which youth workers are consulted before creating the concept? What about platforms in which people which are active in, I don't know, youth participation are part of the design team so that they can be used for real participation process and not only for market research masked with free expression tools. I guess it's about time, but for one thing I'm super sure, we should be able to create something which is usable and enjoyable, because too many times we have this tendency to create something which is perfect in its aim and it's perfect in the ideas, but then the execution, that's the word, it's super poor. And then youngsters will not use it, because why should I use this crap? And we as youth workers feel super frustrated because, you see, they don't use my app, which is nowadays equivalent to they don't come to my youth center. Why? Maybe because you don't offer anything which is really appealing. once and for all, youth work is youth work. Digital is just a part that you add. So, are you able to get people in your youth center? Are you able to get people using the tools that you create? Yeah, the problem is we are not creating any tools yet. So maybe it's really time to start.
Maybe picking up from something where you came to in your answer has a lot to do with youth workers' competencies as well, and how much awareness is there and readiness to work with these issues. Although I think responding to your question, Alicia, probably the change can only happen when we work on it on different dimensions, from the policy level, with the agreements on international level as well, but also with the awareness of youth workers and young people, first of all, as critical citizens as well. But coming to one aspect what you mentioned in your answer, which I think is one of the very crucial points when we are gathering today and starting to look at the ways how we can actually kick off with further developments in smart youth work and digital youth work. And that is about our youth workers, colleagues who are working in the field. What is your experience there? What do you see in relation to the skills, knowledge, attitudes, readiness of youth workers? Now it's your time to let it all out and inspire us to further work on our competencies.
You really don't want me to let it all out.
No, that's the moment now, and then we can try to see how we can actually build up on that in the next 2 days and with the rest of the training courses, hopefully.
So me and my colleagues, Joanna Wronska from Poland and Rafaela Blasnik from Austria, have been hosting 4 editions of our Digital training course so far, meaning that we roughly met few hundreds of youth workers. And the situation is more or less always the same in terms of numbers. We have 1/3 of participants, which is completely clueless. Really, I have this phone in my hand, but I don't know what to do with it. I just use it for calling, which...
1/3, you say?
1/3, yes, more or less. A very small part, which are already into it. So they have also interesting practices to share, and they can really show how things can be done also using digital tools. I remember a girl from a youth center in Finland a couple of years ago, which were showing their activity to get youngsters to know the neighborhood of the youth center, playing Pokemon Go all together in different groups, for instance. And the rest of the participants is super scared because they are much more into the risks and problems part. So they are very happy to discuss which are the risks and which are the problems and which are the power relationships and which are all the bad and evil things that could come out of the shade and jump over us in the digital world. But really not that much proactive in trying to just figure out possible ways of using these tools, which is what they are, for shaping something positive. So when you show even little silly things that can be done, even creating a video altogether with some meaningful content and with some level of acceptable quality so that the youngster would not feel embarrassed to share it among his own contacts, that's enough to say, wow, that's fantastic. But it's really not fantastic.
And if that is the reality, that the gap is really there, and inequality as well in terms of the competencies, what would you say? How we should address that in European youth field? Because obviously the situation is different country-wise as well. But what would be your words of wisdom, in a way, from your background? How do we go about it now? Where do we address first?
Well, we need a lot more training for youth workers, because every time I have this feeling that what I do is just a drop in the ocean. And yesterday evening we were discussing at dinner, how many people do we know that are somehow doing training for youth workers to help them enter smart youth work? maybe we can count them on 2 hands, no more, I think. So we need more people and we need more offers. And we also probably need some more clarity on which are the competences to develop. Now is the moment where you ask me about the competencies, so I will prevent your question. Me and my friend and colleague Martin Fischer made a proposal to Salto Youth, which is now developing the European training strategy, a proposal to include digital competencies in the model. There's been a long discussion whether to put these competencies as something transversal in the different competencies which are there already, or to keep it as a separate new one, which is what in the end happened, but okay. We tried to cluster 5 big areas in which we try to put all different competencies we came up with, also trying to do a comparison with other similar tools and systems like Digicomp EU or Digicomp Edu or something like that. And Spot. There will be a conference about this next February in Vienna, which I will be facilitating together with other colleagues, in which we would exactly addressing these topics, or which competencies in smart youth work. Basically, we find out that there are different areas, as I said, starting from using digital tools and platforms and media as a tool, and then moving on to make them the core of your activity, to make them the content of your activity. So the more you raise the bar, the more difficult it is to achieve that kind of competencies, but probably the more impact you can get if you manage it in the right way.
Irja, anything on competencies?
Well, I have to say youth workers are not alone in this, of course. Like if you look at the general population in Finland, in Europe, and look at their digital skills and competences, people who are in a working age, there is a lot to develop and a lot should be done. Of course, this is more acute in people working with young people in a way, but I would say it's a big challenge on learning these skills on bigger levels. Mm-hmm.
And in any case, maybe one of the potentials, that's probably, and hopefully many of them, but one of the potentials clearly is how we could actually make a better use of all the competencies young people have. And I'm very far away from saying or agreeing actually to the concept of digitally savvy generation, because I think in any case what we as youth workers are strongly responsible for and can actually contribute is the critical reflection part, which the young people would definitely need support in. But still, there is loads of digital competencies and skills what young people have, and very simple formats, even in a practical youth work, where we could have more of this young people as a resource, which we believe a lot in youth work, but maybe not always operationalize in our activities. Mm-hmm. So why not the initiatives where we would have young people teaching their digital skills to the youth workers in open youth centers, maybe to the elderly generation in the local community, whatever. This is something which is not too easy, too difficult to organize actually even. But again, the micro to that side of the fire, any ideas and comments? Yeah. Juha, there is enthusiasm.
Good afternoon. My name is Martin. I work at the Estonian Youth Work Center. And I wanted to ask something which is related to your discussion, namely about young people becoming critical citizens. And so I was wondering, how does digital youth work play into this? Because I think there is a potential, right? The digital realm can provide people and young people with opportunities to participate in governance. But on the other hand, I also think that there is this physical dimension to being a citizen, right? And also a physical dimension to democracy. And also, when we think about this global youth climate movement, which is an important movement, even a very important movement, then that movement also is sort of a collective movement in a physical sense, but on the other hand, it's also facilitated by communication networks. So I was wondering, how do you see the digital realm and its possibilities playing into young people becoming critical citizens? And do you think that there is an awareness on part of young people these days about these opportunities? Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Martin. Mirja, your area, democracy and capability. Let it all out now.
Well, yeah, obviously we have seen these awesome examples lately, like Fridays for Future, like spreading with the social media tools that would have probably never had happened before them. Maybe the promise of this kind of activities has not, it was at some point greater, I think, like having this equal conversations between anyone and everywhere, but still it has been changing the world. And what I think is often overlooked is the possibility for every kind of marginalized groups to like connect and find networks, and the scalability works in that really well. And yeah.
Well, I agree completely. While I was listening to you, I was also thinking that this is also part of the problem, because nowadays we have every kind of marginalized group having a possibility to spread their voice and opinion. And in fact, a lot of people, we shouldn't be allowed to spread voice and opinion. Indeed, they are doing it. But yeah, it's part of the game, I guess. And to me, what I would say is that if I think how to help and empower youngsters to step up and being citizens, also having Fridays for Future movement as a possible source of inspiration, but not only, I would see a few points which should be our starting points. Talking about critical thinking, the first one is working about the news and teaching how to recognize fake news and how to fight back against fake news, which are the problem of online communication nowadays, I would say. There would be no Brexit without fake news, for instance. Second one, it's accountability, which is probably, again, something which has much to do with our role as adults, as reference figures. You cannot teach youngsters to be accountable for what they say or write online if you first do not feel accountable for it, but we should, all of us. So this is something else I would focus on. Fake news, accountability, and again, the idea that there is a lot of new space for exploration, and you can really come up with something new, which is not this idea of creating the next big thing and becoming rich. If you make it, good for you. But because we need new tools for new times, which we are facing, and I guess that it's only happening if some young person would come up with some new idea. It's not possible that us, with our mindset, would be able to find out something to help and support youngsters in this trend that they are getting. More and more we are seeing movements, participation, which have no official leaders and which they only organize and share objectives and ideas through communication systems. which is totally impossibly unexpected from our 20th century perspective. It wasn't there, not even in the most extreme future visions, and instead it's happening in our streets nowadays. So something can change, but yeah, we should help them and support them being there. That's again another thing that we should take into account. Being there with them and be the ones able maybe to ask the right questions. Because once again, I agree, they have a lot of possible technical skills to be taken into account and used, let's say, in our youth work. They're very good in pushing the right buttons, but normally they're not very good in asking themselves and the right questions. So again, there's no such thing as digital natives. Probably there is a thing called digital consumers. It's a fancy story, but it's not true. Youngsters are like more inclined to use digital media. We should be the ones asking them, maybe not why, but what happens? What happens when you do this? What happens when you post this? What happens when you answer like this? This is something that, again, we should take into account, thinking about how to help youngsters to become citizens in a new world which encompasses and includes digital media.
And this, of course, not just in youth work, but in the schools and everywhere in the society as part of this.
True. Surprisingly, listening to you, I found my own inspiration back to something what Massimo has asked beforehand, to emotions and feelings, because for me, the essential part of critical citizenship comes back to the feeling of belonging, and maybe that, together with awareness, accountability, and all of the rest of the aspects, is something we can definitely impact through youth work as well. So surprisingly, finding back something to you have earlier asked, actually. Some last questions, comments? While the people on the other side of the fire are still thinking, what is your own latest inspiration or aha moment in relation to smart youth work or digital youth work? Something you have found really inspiring and could share with us today?
Well, for me, it's been to kind of understand that digitalization also emphasizes the skills, the gaps we have in inequality in general in the society. Some young people get a lot of support from their families in these kinds of issues, like how algorithms affect you and stuff like that. Some don't, and this is, of course, this is a gap known well with like who has the coolest phone and who doesn't. But about like understanding what is the internet, these kind of gaps somehow still are not very well understood, and their societal effect, I think.
Well, to me, there would be quite some of them. I'll just name 2 or 3. One, which came into my mind listening to you before, talking about emotions again. It happened with Black Lives Matter, and then now with Fridays for Future, to understand that if people are connected and emotions are there, bodies will move to get together. They start online and they end up in the street because it's part of our human experience to get together as human beings. So from that moment on, I really stopped to be worried about this thing of being or not being connected. It's happening, it's there. If you put people together online, they will get together in the street as well, first. And second is that I'm seeing more and more, especially working into formal education system schools like this, that introducing some digital tools like coding, robots made with Lego, these kind of fancy things which Juha and me share the passion for, this is able to, let's say, break up a little bit the scheme in which, at least in my country, formal education still is held captive. And I think there's a big need of innovation there as well. And these technologies can, if used properly, help a lot of in innovating and transforming also formal education system. And the very last one is what I'm doing now. There will be a workshop later on about this. It's video games, which are probably considered the worst monster ever. But still, apart from being the biggest entertainment industry in the world nowadays, which is maybe something, more than Hollywood, like 10 times more, are really able to offer emotions and interaction and reflection. And I really wonder what we are waiting for, entering there, being there, and trying to use this huge potential in our favor.
I see too many hands, so maybe to keep the time, but actually, without a joke, we will hopefully take the steps further from this discussion and also in the rest of the program, still to continue on these issues, but also in a much more practical way. Maybe just as a last thing to share from my side, also because we unfortunately missed Mrs. Kristi Vinter-Nemvalts from the Estonian ministry here, would be an inspiration related to the youth policy. Because you might know that Estonia is one of the few countries, I hope I'm correct if I say it like this, who has a specific strategic outlook on smart youth work and youth policy as well. And we are currently starting to develop our new strategic youth development plan until the next 10 or 15 years. And I would be all ears to see what can we actually propose, because we have a national smart youth work concept since 2016. The copy is available as well here and easily findable online. And I would be very thrilled to see how the next policy document, at least on our national level, would be able to do something which has now been called upon again by the Finnish presidency with their council conclusions, how the country should actually try to look at concrete goals and propose concrete actions in their policy plans in order to make the steps further. So this is also one of the part of the inspirations which I think is as much needed as the youth work practice development related to the smart youth work field. This is about it for the first start. Let's call it, like we said, a little bit of a teaser, or hopefully helping ourselves to tune our minds working on the topics of smart youth work and digital youth work. Thank you to all of those who watched us online. And we're going to continue with the rest of the people here in this room. Thank you so much, Mirja and Michela. Big applause to you. And Michela will still stay with us until tomorrow. And Mirja is leaving very soon now. So we will now have a 7.5 minutes break. That's an Estonian way how we work. Grab your coffee, talk to the colleagues who still didn't say hello, and there is an announcement from Juha.
I believe we can actually have 10 minutes-ish. But come back here to this space when you're done with the break. So grab coffee, grab water. We call them comfort breaks. So do whatever you do to keep your mind fresh and keep yourself moving. If you need to, during the break, check which workshop you will go to. We won't have the workshops yet. We will have you talking to each other first for a bit, and then we go directly to the workshops. If we didn't mention this, the Wi-Fi password here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So up to 8, all the numbers. Highly secure, but easy to remember, which is nice. And I've been told that during this 10-minute break, the campfire will still be left here. So if you want to take a picture of yourself in this, I think, really cool surrounding, have a buddy take your picture with your smartphone with this one. And one final item, workshop leaders, please come to me up here on stage right now, so we will check that you have everything. Enjoy your break.
Enjoy.
Yeah.